Here we go. Let's go. Let's do this. Last one of the year. Welcome in. I am Farzin Vasugian. Appreciate all of you guys joining me for this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. It's the last one of the season, regardless of what happens. It is the last one. Wow. Here we go. Appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and listen live on Facebook and YouTube. And for everyone else watching and listening afterwards, thank you to you as well. Obviously, breaking down the big game between the Chiefs and the Eagles, Super Bowl Sunday. Who wins that game? What's the score prediction going to be? Who's my MVP? I will address all of that on this podcast today. We will break down the Eagles like we do every single game, like we have all year long, and we will let you know what you need to know about the Eagles in a nutshell. So we're going to be doing that tonight. A lot to get to here. We'll talk about what the Chiefs need to do to pull out a win in this one here. What do they do to stop Saquon Barkley or limit him at least? What's got to be done? All of that here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Thank you guys again for tuning in and watching live. And again, those of you listening to the archive version, thank you to you guys as well. Yeah, Robert, it's the last one. Wasn't that the title of the last episode of Friends? The last one? It's like, yeah, the last one. Not the last one. Permanently. Look, I just want to take this moment to thank everyone. I know not a lot of people are tuning in now. People are still rolling into the live stream, so I'll say this again later on. A couple of years ago, I brought this podcast back, not knowing if people were going to tune in or not. Boy, I was proven wrong. I kind of had my doubts about bringing the podcast back. I'll be honest. I said, hey, I'll do it because I did a poll with you guys. And the majority of you said, yes, do it. I think it was like 90% yes. And a single digit percent said no. But a lot of you guys said you would listen and you guys kept your promise there. Obviously, certain games had much more viewership than others, which is completely understandable. But you guys have certainly helped this year a lot. This season alone has been insanity in terms of podcast numbers, the social media engagement, the podcast numbers and the social media engagement, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, they have all been at an all-time high. Never been this high before. Not even remotely close to the second best season we've ever had. So thank you guys. We are very close to surpassing 45,000 new followers since last year's Super Bowl. That's how monstrous of a season this has been. The podcast views are just not even comparable to last year. I see your comment, Mike. I appreciate it. D, thank you. A different Robert in here. Thank you. Teresa, Vicky on YouTube, Talon, Chris, you guys are awesome. And there's many more who will tune in. So you guys are the best. You guys are fucking awesome. Thank you guys so much. Now, it's not over. We have one more game left and we will get to that. We'll definitely share the injury report. My God. For a season that's been injury-riddled for Kansas City, and I know they don't have all of their players available, and the big one, of course, being Rashee Rice, this is the thinnest injury report of the season. Listen, we keep talking about peaking at the right time. Not just peaking at the right time, but, being healthy at the right time, too. Listen, I know a lot of people don't like to use the word luck with health. I mean, you kind of do. Injuries are never within your control. I mean, sure, there are certain, conditioning and body prep you can do, but at the end of the day, it certainly increases your chances of preventing injury. Yes. But boy, I mean, for as tough of a season it's been for Kansas City, they've certainly been on the better end of the injury bug lately. I mean, you're looking at the Eagles. They're missing some players. A couple of guys were limited in practice today, and we'll get to those and whether or not that's going to be anything to be concerned about this week. Spoiler alert, I don't think so. So we will see what happens with the Eagles and who becomes available for them. A lot of talk about Brandon Graham, who is expected to play in this one as well. That would be a huge deal for the Eagles if he's available, especially with that defense they've got there, number one in the NFL. Gonna get all of that very soon. Want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. Football season is winding down, but we still have the NBA, the NHL, college basketball in full swing. The Big 12 tournament coming up very soon in Kansas City, just a little over a month. In downtown Kansas City, I am looking forward to that event. Royals baseball is starting up very soon, so whether you're a Royals fan or a fan of another team, you can go get your tickets over at SeatGeek, and new customers can put in my promo code FARZINE, and you'll save $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. So go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets, and at checkout, put in my promo code FARZINE if you're a new SeatGeek customer, and you can save $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. All right, before we get into the injury report, this is something I do want to touch on here. We brought this up before, and I'd love to know what you guys think is going to happen. The NFL Honors is going to take place tomorrow, and that is where we will learn who will be the MVP, the Coach of the Year, all of those other awards. I don't believe the Chiefs are up for any awards, crazy enough, so make whatever you will with that. Andy Reid's in the running for Coach of the Year, but I don't think he'll get many votes for that. I think he should be. I mean, listen, I understand the Coach of the Year, the criteria behind that, but given the injuries that Kansas City's had to overcome, you got to give it to him. At the very least, I hope he gets some votes, but I can understand, giving it to Kevin O'Connell. I mean, nobody thought the Vikings would even come close to what they were. I know it was a bad ending to the season, but that's just the way it all worked out. But you know what else we're going to learn at the NFL Honors tomorrow night? We'll find out who will be elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There are two big names that the Hall of Fame voters, and it's very likely by now they've already concluded and have submitted their ballots. If not, they should be doing that as we speak for who they're voting to get into the Hall of Fame. Eli Manning is one name that a lot of the Hall of Fame voters are going to have a discussion about. Another player who they're going to have a discussion about is Jim Tyrer, the former offensive tackle for Kansas City. He was a huge part of Kansas City's success in the 60s and 70s with that group of players, Len Dawson, Otis Taylor, a big part of that offense with Mike Garrett, Ed Buddy. The fact that Ed Buddy's not in the Hall of Fame is criminal to me. Jim Tyrer, of course, is in the Chiefs Hall of Fame. For those who don't know, Jim Tyrer, after his career, ended up murdering his wife and took his own life. A very similar situation to what happened with Jovan Belcher, the former Chiefs linebacker, in 2012. Why is this a big deal? Why is this being discussed? I think that kind of thing with domestic violence today in our society, it's a far bigger deal than it's ever been. There are a lot of things that have been brought to light in our society today. Mental health, race, so many things. With Jim Tyrer, if he gets elected into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which from a football standpoint, he absolutely should have been in a long time ago, and he was considered at one point. But the Hall of Fame has kind of put his name to the side because they felt like they don't want a guy with this dark cloud over his name to be in the Hall of Fame. Well, some people feel like enough time has passed, and that even though what he did was bad, that's not what the Hall of Fame was about. And I know a lot of people will say, well, what about O.J. Simpson? Yes, that happened well after his Hall of Fame induction. So it's one of those situations right there where, I don't know. Listen, I don't have the right answer to this story here. I don't. Because here's my thing. Let's say he gets elected into the Hall of Fame, which I think he should be just from a football standpoint. But what message is being sent? I think the Hall of Fame voters, even though they shouldn't really think about the outside noise, I think they kind of wonder, would this give the NFL a bad name if Jim Tyrer was named to the Hall of Fame? And here's another question I have Is this something the Chiefs would even acknowledge? Like whenever a former Chief goes into the Hall of Fame, especially if they spend a lot of time in Kansas City, like Tony Gonzalez, they definitely want to make make a note of that, post it on their social media, on their website, and honor that player at some point during the following season in one of the home games. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, see, I'm seeing some comments. Did he have CTE? That whole situation. Again, I don't know. I know there are a lot of studies being done on these kinds of things, and I guess I know this is the situation with Jovan Belcher, where he was buried, but they wanted to bring his body back and study his brain to see if he had CTE. CTE, head injuries, and these kinds of things that some players have gotten into after their playing careers is something that is still being looked into today. I know concussions, that was a big deal several years ago, not as much today. In fact, I think I saw the number of concussions have certainly gone down. Some feel like the new kickoff system where you see a lot more touchbacks now, maybe that's playing a role. I'm not sure. But I just wonder, like my biggest question here is, let's say Tyler gets voted in, and it sounds like there are some Hall of Fame voters that are leaning in that direction. Would Clark Hunt want the Chiefs to say something about it on social media? Do the Chiefs want to even acknowledge this? That's my biggest question here. I suppose we'll find out in a little over 24 hours when the Hall of Fame and class of 2025 will be announced soon. Look, this is one of those situations where you could have 100 football fans that would be in favor of him going into the Hall of Fame, and there would be 100 that say no, you should not have him in there, and they would have a lot of strong points. And people feel like, if you put him in the Hall of Fame, you don't care about domestic violence, and that's not the case. So I think that's the issue here. What about, look at what happened with Ray Rice. He had an incident that everybody knew about. The report was out there, but when the footage of this came out, the Ravens were like, see you later. Nope, not on our team. Kareem Hunt had a similar matter. And I don't like to compare instances. Now, it wasn't as physically awful. What Kareem Hunt did was still pretty bad, and I said that at the time. But the Chiefs felt like he did the work. Obviously, the Browns felt like, what he did was bad, but not necessarily bad enough to where he should not be signed. I know John Dorsey being with the Browns, that probably played a hand in that as well, him joining the Browns. But I just think, it just wasn't as bad as the Ray Rice thing. So it's been unfortunate just the way things have gone with the NFL with some of these off the field incidents. Is this one that they want to award? Not awarding what Jim Tyrer did. To be clear, they're doing this for his namesake, what he did in the NFL. But you just cannot put Jim Tyrer in the Hall of Fame and not just completely forget about what happened. I think that's the big dilemma here with this. So we'll find out in a little over 24 hours. Let's quickly go to the injury report here and discuss the Chiefs and the Eagles. Look at that. Look how thin that is. We have not seen this all year. This is the shortest injury report we have seen all season. Kareem Hunt was on the injury report last week. Got a little banged up in that AFC Championship game against the Bills, but he's okay. Jawan Taylor's been on the injury report for a while. I know going into the AFC Championship game, who was it? Ian Rappaport was making a huge deal that Patrick Mahomes was on the injury report. Mahomes has been on the injury report since that Cleveland game where he suffered that ankle injury. Yeah, ankle for Mahomes, knee for Taylor, and of course you see Sky Moore, who's still on IR. He is he's practicing, and I don't think Sky Moore gets activated to the 53-man roster. I think Sky Moore is just more of a practice guy, just an extra player that they have available in practice. trying to utilize him the best they can because McCole Hardman's no longer available. They used McCole Hardman's 21-day window. They decided that it would be best to not return him to the 53-man roster, and therefore, as a result, his season is over, which is unfortunate given how that pans out. I mean, listen, at least he had that moment last year. He can at least say that. We'll touch on McCole Hardman more. I just don't feel like tonight's the appropriate time for that because there's a possibility McCole Hardman has played his last game with the Chiefs. We said that last year, right after the Super Bowl, and then he ended up coming back. So we'll see what happens. We'll discuss that in the offseason. Obviously, regardless what happens, win or lose, within the next week or two, we'll definitely have to touch on some of the offseason expectations, predictions, all of that stuff. But as far as the Eagles go, they have a very long injury report here now. Nothing too terrible here. A lot of full participants here, including Zach Bond, who is a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. Landon Dickerson, one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. Dallas Goedert, a very solid tight end. Cam Jurgens, the center, who's filling it, replacing rather, Jason Kelce at that position there. As far as a couple of players who are limited, Devontae Smith with that hamstring injury. You have Kenneth Gainwell. It says Kenny Gainwell on here, but I notice some places say Kenneth and some say Kenny. So if it's coming from the Eagles website, I suppose Kenny is the right, is what he wants to be called. But Kenny Gainwell with a concussion and a knee injury. And then you have Jalen Carter, the standout interior defensive lineman for the Eagles in his second season, dealing with an illness. That's really not too big of a deal unless it somehow gets worse as the week goes on. He is absolutely expected to play this week. So I would say the illness is not a big deal from the Eagles standpoint. If for whatever reason, hypothetically speaking, and again, hypothetically, if it gets worse for him, then I would say there's a reason to be concerned there. So yeah, that's definitely a concern for if he were to not play, just to be clear. The big one right there, you see Brandon Graham on IR with that elbow injury. He has not played for the Eagles since the end of November. That was against the Rams. Had a sack in that game too. In fact, in the games he played, 5 sacks for Brandon Graham. How many games did he play this season? I believe 11 with the Eagles. Yeah, 11 games this year with the Eagles. And he had 5 sacks. Or sorry, I'm reading that wrong. 3.5 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss, 6.5 run stuffs, and 1 forced fumble. So solid season, all things considering, playing just 11 games and part of a very strong defensive unit. Brandon Graham has been there forever. Drafted in 2010 in the first round, and he's been with them since. You think of 2010, that's when Eric Berry was drafted, Dexter McCluster, Javier Arenas. Remember that group of players? Kendrick Lewis. Boy, that 2010 draft class, that was a while back. So Brandon Graham, been with the Eagles a very long time. His entire career been with them. So maybe it's possible this is going to be his final game in his NFL career as he does turn 37 this offseason. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And of course, we'll definitely post about it as the week goes on if Graham's going to be available for the game. Yeah, unless it's COVID. I mean, I've had COVID twice. I'm 2-0 against COVID, unvaccinated. So I've got that little record there. But yeah, hopefully that's not the case for Jalen Carter. And it doesn't appear to be the case. He is expected to play from the reports I've seen. All right. Like I said, not a lot of news. Obviously, we've been doing a lot of podcasts. We did one Monday. We did one Tuesday. And we're doing one today. 3 in a row. Hey, just like the Chiefs. What do you know? Knock on wood. Hopefully that's the case. Let's get into the game here. The referee for this one is Ron Torbert. He is very famous for being in that meme with Patrick Mahomes where they're exchanging the jerseys. So the NFL had some fun picking Ron Torbert in this one here. Read the shirt. This is going to be on Fox, and as a result, your announcers are going to be Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady. I already saw some complaints that because Tom Brady is a part owner of the Raiders, he technically cannot criticize the refs. He kind of did that in a game this year. So people are already complaining, like, if there's a bad call in favor of the Chiefs, Tom Brady can't say anything. Go cry yourself a river. The Chiefs, last I checked, it was a 1.5 point spread. The Chiefs are minus 125 favorites. The Eagles at plus 105. The over-under for this one was 48.5. Now, this was earlier in the week when I was prepping for all of this. Let me just make sure that's the case. Boy, it is very close. Has not moved too much. Over-under is still the same. I know in some sports books, the spread is at 1 in favor of the Chiefs. The money line on DraftKings has changed. The Chiefs are at minus 122, so a little bit of a dip there. And the Eagles are at plus 102. So merely similar. And when you look at the percentage of the bets, even though a lot of people think it's rigged, 55% of the money line is going in favor of the Eagles. Imagine that. People think it's rigged, but they're still betting on the Eagles. Don't know how that works. Maybe you guys can educate me on that one. Head coach for the Eagles, Nick Sirianni, a former assistant here in Kansas City under Todd Haley and Romeo Crennel. That 4-year era there. Started off as the quality control coach in 2009, the assistant QB coach the following year. That was when Charlie Weis was the offensive coordinator. And then when Charlie Weis left, he went back to being a quality control coach. And then in 2012, under Romeo Crennel, and I think Bill Muir was not Bill Muir. It was Brian Dable, who's also now a head coach. He was Sirianni, was the wide receivers coach in 2012, which Dwayne Bowe was a part of there. After leaving Kansas City, he was the assistant for the Chargers, and then he went to the Colts as their offensive coordinator for 3 seasons. And after 2020 and 2021, they fired Doug Peterson and they hired Nick Sirianni. Kellen Moore is their offensive coordinator. I think Kellen Moore has really been an underrated offensive coordinator. If you haven't noticed, the New Orleans Saints have not hired a head coach yet. That is kind of a surprise to me. They're the only team in the NFL that does not have a head coach. Or did they hire someone? No, not yet. Darren Rizzi's the interim head coach. For some reason I thought I might have missed that. No, they're still waiting. I thought it was going to be Joe Brady. I thought Joe Brady was sealed, done, delivered, ready to be the head coach. No, not to be the case. And there are some reports out there that Kellen Moore is expected to be the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I think that's very well deserved for Kellen Moore. I know he was the Cowboys QB coach in 2018 and then was promoted to offensive coordinator from 2019 to 2022. I've always liked what Kellen Moore's done in his coaching career. He was also the offensive coordinator 1 season with the Chargers, now with the Eagles. I think he's done a fairly good job. And I know a lot of people bring up, he wasn't a good quarterback. Okay, well, Doug Peterson wasn't either, and he won a Super Bowl, led the Eagles to their first ever Super Bowl win. Andy Reid could not give the Eagles a Super Bowl win. Andy Reid couldn't do it. Dick Vermeil, but Doug Peterson did. I know Doug Peterson just got fired again, but he's had a lot of success at the end of the day. So just because you were a bad player does not mean you can't be a good coach. And Kellen Moore is one of those guys who, didn't have the greatest playing career, but is someone that's certainly done a very good job in the coaching ranks for sure. As far as the Eagles ranking, when it comes to total offense, they're 7th in the NFL. Chiefs are 10th in total defense. They're 31st in the NFL on passing here. And I know some people might feel like that's a little bit misleading here. The Chiefs are 19th against the pass. They're 2nd in running the football. Obviously, the Ravens number 1. The Chiefs are a top 10 team against the run, 9th against the run, have not allowed a 100-yard rusher from a running back all year. Lamar Jackson, the only one. The Eagles are 6th in points per game, scoring almost 24.5 points per game. And the Chiefs, 4th in points per game allowed at 19.5, close to 19.5. Third down, Eagles 10th best, converting almost 41% of the time. The Chiefs' third down defense has not been good, 28th in the league, allowing almost a 44% conversion rate. As far as red zone offense goes, Eagles are 12th in the NFL. Chiefs' red zone defense 10th in the league. So there's the head-to-head rankings right there for the Eagles offense and the Chiefs defense. Eagles, by the way, they have the fewest pass attempts per game at almost 26 passes per game. First in the NFL in rush attempts averaging more than 36 rush attempts per game. Baltimore is second in rush attempts per game. Obviously, when you think of the Philadelphia Eagles and what they've done this year, a lot of newcomers have certainly stepped up both on offense and on defense. And on offense, that big name there is Saquon Barkley coming in from the Giants. And I know people keep mentioning the Giants. They let him go. They let him go. How could they do that? Well, yeah, how could they do that? They certainly screwed that up. 2,005 rushing yards for Saquon Barkley, the 8th best in a single season in NFL history. They didn't even play the last week of the regular season, so he did that in 16 games, 100 yards shy of tying Eric Dickerson's record from 1984 with the Rams. He's had 442 rushing yards in the postseason alone. That is pretty damn good. Might have one of the best postseason performances as far as rushing yards go. And because the Eagles, they did not have the postseason bye, there's a chance that he might have one of the best rushing performances in a postseason. Had less than 80 yards in 3 games. One of them was during a blowout win, I think, over the Cowboys. So Barkley has hardly been held below 100 yards this season. He's averaging 147 rushing yards per game in the playoffs alone. He had 118 yards and 3 touchdowns off 15 runs in the NFC Championship game against Washington. He ran 26 times for more than 200 yards, 205 to be exact, and a pair of touchdowns against the Rams. And in the divisional round against the Packers, 119 yards off 25 carries. He's been averaging 5.8 yards per carry in the regular season, almost 1 yard higher in the postseason, 6.7 yards per carry in the playoffs. That is insanity for Saquon Barkley. So obviously that is something the Chiefs need to be aware of in this one here. Jalen Hurts, just under 3,000 passing yards. That's 20th in the NFL, 18 touchdowns, 5 picks, 14 rushing touchdowns for Jalen Hurts. Not a surprise there, given how the Eagles offense operates. 505 scrambling yards. 505 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and 4 rushing touchdowns in the playoffs for Jalen Hurts. He threw for 246 yards against Washington, had 1 passing touchdown and 3 rushing touchdowns. So Jalen Hurts responsible for 4 touchdowns total against the Commanders in the NFC Championship game. He had more passing yards earlier, 278 in week 1 versus Green Bay, earlier in the season that I'm referring to. In week 3 against New Orleans, he had 311 yards. And against the Browns in week 5, he had 265 yards. Threw for 290 against the Steelers in mid-December. But yeah, hasn't really had the biggest numbers passing yards wise, which is understandable given that the Eagles are a massive run-heavy team. Hurts did get hurt against Washington, where he had 3 scrambles for 41 yards, averaging almost 14 yards per scramble. That was the best he had all year. But he did leave early with a concussion, missed the next 2 games. But he came back ready in time for the playoffs. Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee, they filled in for him. One very interesting note on Jalen Hurts. This comes from Warren Sharp, who runs Sharp Football, a really good and underrated sports football website. He mentioned Spags and the Chiefs when it comes to their defensive coverages, the splits, when blitzing and all of that. When it comes to zone blitzes, the Chiefs have the number 1 pressure rate in the NFL at 51%. And as far as yards allowed, second. Now, whenever the Chiefs are in man coverage and they're blitzing, they've allowed their 26th in pressure rate. And as far as yards allowed, 28th. Jalen Hurts, against zone blitzes this year, he's been sacked 17% of the time. That is the worst in the NFL. And that's 10 sacks when blitz against a zone defense. The Chiefs do like to run that man-to-man cover defense more, but maybe that's something to consider if you're Kansas City. I mean, what's worked has worked really well, but Jalen Hurts has certainly struggled whenever defenses are in zone coverage and are blitzing. That is something that I think Kansas City needs to be aware of here. If Kansas City can do that, this could be a really long day. Now, in order to have opportunities to do that, you're going to have to force the Eagles to pass the ball more. How do you stop Jalen Hurts in this one here? I think Kansas City has the defense to do it. And let me just say this with Spags right off the bat. This is let's just remember who Steve Spagnuolo is, okay? Last year, where the Chiefs' offense was very vulnerable with the drops and the penalties, the Chiefs' defense did come through when that team really needed it last year. What else has Spags done so impressive? Last week, in the AFC Championship game, where they shut down the tush push. I mean, they made it very difficult for the Bills. Very difficult. They stopped him on a 2-point try, made him attempt it multiple times in the same series, set of downs, and also forced a turnover on down at one point when the Bills failed on a tush push. And yes, they failed on the tush push. There's no conclusive evidence that shows he crossed the first down marker with the ball. His body did, but not the ball. So again, people want to complain about that one, but it was the right call there for sure. Even Ross Tucker, who said he thought it was a first down, even admitted on his podcast, he's like, there's no conclusive evidence of that. What else has Spags done that's so impressive? Oh yeah, wasn't he the same guy with the New York Giants? His defense, to a lot of people's surprise, stood up to the mighty New England Patriots offense, a historic offense, one of the best offenses in NFL history, maybe the best offense to ever be placed on a field. And they held them to 14 points. I still remember the Patriots going for it on 4th and 15 at one point in that game. That's how overconfident they were. Spags and that defense, Michael Strahan, that group, not afraid. That defensive performance against the Patriots with the Giants, that is Steve Spagnuolo's best performance he's ever had as a coach. And that landed him the head coaching job with the Rams. So when you look at Spags, this is a guy who has been presented a lot of challenges in the playoffs in the past. And they have come through many, many times. I think even times with the Chiefs, like look at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago against the Buccaneers, which Patrick Mahomes said that's the one game he thinks about the most. And I can respect that. That just tells you the guy does not want a game like that to ever happen again. Always looking to improve and not let things like that to ever happen again. But look at that game. Okay, the score was 31-9, but it's not like the Chiefs defense just let the Bucks walk all over them. It was 14-6 late in the first half. And for whatever reason, Andy Reid called timeout at a really bad time when the Bucks did not look like they wanted to even try to score. And Andy Reid calling timeout, all that did was help the Bucks in that situation there. I mean, Kansas City's defense kept them in the game. That should have been an 8-point game going into halftime. But it was well out of reach. They got a touchdown. And you guys know the rest of the story there. Against the Bills this year, I know the Bills scored 30 points in that game, the most the Chiefs have allowed since they played the Eagles in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. But in that Bills loss, the defense didn't play that bad. It was 16-14 at halftime, and it was the same score going into the fourth quarter. Kansas City's defense kept coming up with stops. Unfortunately, the offense could not return the favor. So my point here is, I think Spags will have some sort of a formula against Saquon Barkley. Not letting him have the big runs. It's going to be very important for these linebackers to plug those holes and not let Saquon go off for those big gains there. That is going to be very key in this game. And you've got some good run stuffers there. And Mike Pennell, Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Derek Nottie, not a great defensive lineman, but has had some good moments against the run. FAU's been really good against the run. I remember the Super Bowl last year had a couple of good run stops against Christian McCaffrey. I mentioned Mike Pennell, a very underrated defensive tackle, another underrated guy, Turk Wharton for the Chiefs. So you've got the defensive line for that. That is that's something that Kansas City's got to be aware of for sure. Obviously, we're spending a lot of time on this because we know the Eagles, they've been run heavy all year and they'll be run heavy in this game. But if you can find a way to stop Saquon Barkley and force second and long, third and long situations, that's bad news for Jalen Hurts, who hasn't done real well in third and long situations. And as we just noted against the blitz, that is something that'll definitely hurt the Eagles on this one here. If Saquon Barkley is shut down by Spags in that defense, this could be a really long day. I think Saquon will have his good moments here. I don't think he will be shut down. I do think he'll be limited, though. I don't think he's going to go off like he has in a lot of other games this season. Keep in mind, Kansas City's not allowed a 100-yard rusher all season long. When you just look at the NFL this season, and let's look at that real quickly. I know Saquon's the best this year, but it's not like the Chiefs have gone up against, worms this season when it comes to the running back position. They've gone up against some damn good running backs this year. Let's go over that number real quickly. They went up against Derrick Henry the very first game of the NFL season. Henry was kind of leading the NFL in rushing yards for a bit, and then Saquon took over. They also faced Bijan Robinson, who finished third in the NFL in rushing. Now, you have Saquon at 2,005 yards, Derrick Henry's at 1,900, and there's a massive gap between 2 and 3. So I do want to make that very clear, but they shut down Bijan Robinson. In fact, on that 4th and inches play, they made Bijan Robinson lose 3-4 yards there, which was huge. Chuba Hubbard, who's had a really good season, the Chiefs shut him down. Bucky Irving, who was very good this year, didn't do much against Kansas City. Najee Harris, actually, I think that was Najee Harris hurt in that game? I can't remember. Joe Mixon had 88 yards against the Chiefs. That's, I believe, the most. James Cook had 82. So those guys didn't do too bad. They were both 1,000-yard rushers this season. I know J.K. Dobbins for the Chargers, he finished 22nd in rushing, but he was a top 5 rusher when the Chiefs faced him. You know who else was a top 5 rusher when they faced Kansas City? Alvin Kamara, and he got shut down. So just looking through the names here, the Chiefs have gone up against some really good running back. Jordan Mason was doing really well this season before the injuries came into play here, and the Chiefs shut him down. So Kansas City's done really, really well this year against a lot of good running backs. Obviously, none of those, like if you're going to put a tier list, Saquon and Derrick Henry are 1 and 2. You look at the rest, everyone else is second, third tier there. But those are all still running backs who were in the top 5 or top 10 when they faced Kansas City. So, I'm very curious to see how this. I said for a long time, I want to know how Kansas City is going to match up against Saquon Barkley. I've been asking for that since the middle of the regular season, and here we are. We have it now. And by the way, one quick note here: the Eagles have been outscoring their opponents 105-55 in the playoffs there. So a pretty good number there for sure. As far as their other running back, their 4th-round rookie Will Shipley, he had 82 yards in the regular season. 34 of them came in the blowout win over Dallas. And he had another 32 in week 18 when the backups played against the Giants. Against the Commanders, Shipley took over late in the game, rushed for 77 yards, almost equaling his regular season total. He had 77 yards and a touchdown off 4 carries alone. So he's definitely a guy that should get involved in this one here. He handled some of their kick return duties as well. So that tells you about his speed for sure with the Eagles. A.J. Brown, really good wide receiver for the Eagles. Didn't play in 4 games this year. Still managed to surpass 1,000 receiving yards. Averaged more than 16 yards per catch. 7 touchdowns. Fairly quiet against Green Bay and the Rams, but had 6 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown against the Commanders in the NFC title game. Devontae Smith, another good wide receiver for the Eagles, had almost 70 catches for more than 800 yards and 8 touchdowns this season. His only 2 100-plus yard receiving games came in December, so he did pick it up right at the right time as the season was coming to an end there. 4 catches off 4 targets in every single playoff game. All 3 playoff games for the Eagles. He has 121 total receiving yards in the postseason. So 12 catches, 12 targets, 121 yards for him. Dallas Goedert played in 10 games this year, dealt with some hamstring and knee injuries, almost 500 yards and 2 touchdowns this season for him, 188 yards and 1 touchdown against Green Bay. And he's had 15 catches this postseason. They also have Grant Calcaterra, 24 catches, 298 yards, 4th most on the team. So We know Kansas City struggled with tight ends, especially earlier on in the season. So we'll see what happens there. And the Eagles, they do have a couple of day 3 rookies as part of their wide receiver crew there. Johnny Wilson, how do I say this correctly? Ainias Smith. So those guys are also part of the Eagles offense there. When you look at the Eagles offensive line, a really good offensive line. I mean, a lot of these guys were all pros this year. You look at Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, 3 really good offensive linemen this year. I know Fred Johnson's played a little bit as well. In the 14 games he played, he allowed 8 sacks and 38 pressures when filling in at both left tackle and right tackle. Mailata is going to go up against Mike Danda for most of the game. Lane Johnson's going to go up against George Karlaftis, who's been massive in the postseason. Karlaftis, of course, had the 3 sacks against the Houston Texans, and then against the Bills in the AFC Championship game. No sacks for George, but had that huge pressure on Josh Allen. And if Josh Allen has a clean pocket, he probably is able to throw that pass there. I know a lot of people are talking about Dalton Kincaid not catching that. He should have caught it, but he did have to make the difficult stop and turn around with his body and try to dive and make that play there. I'm just saying, if that was a clean pocket, Allen hits him for sure in stride. But that's not what happened there. And if it wasn't for George Karlaftis' pressure, that's completion at the 30-yard line, 35-yard line, wherever it was. And the Bills still had, I believe, 2 timeouts, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, they would have had plenty of time to try to get a touchdown in that situation there. So that could have been a really bad situation for Kansas City. Thankfully, not the case. Cam Jurgens at center replacing Jason Kelce. He's allowed 6 sacks on the season, 34 pressures. Mekhi Becton, their right guard, he's allowed 5 sacks. So those are the 2 I guess the quote unquote weak points, and I use that term loosely because their entire offensive line is fairly good. But if there is a little bit of a weak point there, it is the center and the right guard, Jurgens and Becton. Jurgens' pressure rate, he's allowed a pressure rate almost 14% of the time. Mekhi Becton, 9.4% of the time. Mailata, Dickerson, and Johnson, all less than 5%. So obviously they're very good in that category there. Creed Humphrey's pressure rate is at 0.0 according to the 33rd team. That is insanity. I mean, that's pretty good right there. Trey Smith at a 7.6%, Jawan Taylor 6.1, Tooney at 4.5, Caliendo just north of 9% there. So that is the pressure rate allowed for both offensive linemen going into this game. I saw some of you guys in the comments talking about Vic Fangio here. Yeah. Vic Fangio, who the Chiefs are very familiar with, former Broncos head coach. He's a defensive coordinator for the Eagles and was the head coach of the Broncos from 2019 to 2021, was the Eagles consultant in 2022. That was the year the Chiefs and Eagles met in Super Bowl 57, was the Dolphins defensive coordinator last year, and the Chiefs played the Dolphins twice. First one was in Germany, and the second one was in Kansas City for the wild card game where the Chiefs blew them out in that cold tundra game. And now he's the Eagles defensive coordinator back in Philly this season. They're number 1 in total defense. Chiefs offense and total offense, 19th in that category. Second in passing, or excuse me, second against the pass. Kansas City, 15th there. Chiefs are 23rd running the ball. Eagles are 8th best in stopping it. First in points per game allowed at just under 18 points per game. Chiefs are 12th in scoring at 23.2 points per game. As far as the red zone defense goes, the Eagles 5th best in that category at 48%, and the Chiefs, they are 22nd in scoring. Their red zone offense has not been good this regular season, but they were 4 of 6 in the red zone in the AFC Championship game. That was a big improvement for Kansas City there. They've also got the 9th best third down defense, but the Chiefs have the 3rd best third down offense in the NFL. They've done a really good job in that category. And that number did plummet because of the 38-0 blowout loss against the Broncos. So keep that in mind. Kansas City was above 50% before that game. So keep that in mind. When you look at their defense, I mean, you got to start with Zach Bond, a defensive player of the year candidate. It's crazy because they've got an MVP and an offensive player of the year candidate in Saquon Barkley, who's a newcomer, and they have Zach Bond, who's also a newcomer. This guy was a special teams player for the Saints. He came into Philadelphia, and Vic Fangio had a lot of confidence in him. And boy, what a season for him. 151 tackles, 11 tackles for a loss, a pick, 5 forced fumbles. And he's doing really well because Nakobe Dean, who is doing really well this season, he's on IR, and a guy who was playing very well for them until the injury. So Zach Bonds really had to pick it up for them and certainly has done so. Another linebacker they've got there, Oren Burks, has done really well. A 2018 draft pick by Green Bay, had a sack in the NFC Championship game. When you look at their edge rushers, Josh Sweat and Nolan Smith, Sweat, another 2018 draft pick from this one by Philly, led the team with 8 sacks, yet to have one in the postseason. He'll be facing Joe Thuney a lot in this game. And then Nolan Smith, he's at 6.5 sacks on the season, 4 sacks in 3 playoff games, had a pair of sacks against Green Bay, had one against the Rams, one against the Commanders in that NFC title game. So Nolan Smith definitely with the hot hand coming into the Super Bowl for the Eagles defense. And you look at their defensive line, obviously it starts with Jalen Carter, an all-pro, 4.5 sacks during the season. He had 2 sacks against the Rams. And then you have Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, guys who are really good at that defensive line there. PFF, not very confident in their run-stopping abilities there. So that's an area where Kansas City might exploit that, but that's, that's where Zach Bond and Oren Burks certainly can come in there. So if they have a player like a Noah Gray who lines up as a fullback, or maybe Carson Steele if he were to play in this game, those are the guys who might play that fullback role. And if there is a nice little hole there for Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco, that's where the fullbacks might go after one of those linebackers there. I mentioned Bond or Burks to try to prevent the run stops there. Kareem Hunt's run fairly well. He's not putting massive numbers. That's not what they want nor expect from Kareem Hunt. If they do get that, that's great. But he's doing enough to give this offense a jolt. That's what he's done since the very first moment he got to Kansas City. Their defensive backs, boy, this is a really good group of defensive backs here. They don't thrive so much statistically, the cornerbacks especially, kind of similar to Kansas City's cornerbacks. They don't get a lot of interceptions. CJ Gardner-Johnson, that guy gets a lot of picks, 6 of them to be exact, for 116 return yards. He also had 1 pick six, 1 forced fumble as well. 3 picks in the last 2 regular season games. Reed Blankenship, another safety on the team, had a forced fumble against Green Bay and had a fumble recovery against the Commanders. Sidney Brown, also a very solid safety, part of that secondary there. When you look at the quarterbacks, Darius Slay, one of the best cover quarterbacks in the NFL for sure. No interceptions in the regular season, but had an interception against Green Bay. Their first-round draft pick, Quinion Mitchell, no interceptions in the regular season, but had 2 in the playoffs. And their second-round draft pick, the slot corner, Cooper DeJean, he's played fairly well this season. He did not have an interception this regular season as well. But when you look at just what he's done overall, he's played a lot of great cover corner this year for Philadelphia. Had 1 forced fumble on the season. Quinion Mitchell has had 18 pass deflections this year. Dijon had 6. So those guys have done a really good job as far as trying to go out there and bat those passes down. When you look at fumble recovery situations, Cooper DeJean had a forced fumble against the Rams, also had a fumble recovery against the Rams. I can't remember if that was the one he recovered, his own fumble, but did have that there in the NFC divisional round game against the Rams. And that was a very close one there too, where the Rams looked like they were put away after that big run by Saquon Barkley, but they were able to come back and try to make an effort near the end there, but unable to pull it off in the end there. So that is the Eagles defense in a nutshell. Their special teams unit, which is coached by Michael Clay, former Oregon Duck, played briefly in Miami, coached the Eagles defense and special teams in 2014 and 2015. Then he left, joined San Francisco, had a couple of other stops, and then rejoined the Eagles in 2021 as a special teams coordinator for the first time in his career. Jake Elliott, 28 of 36, 6 of 7 in the playoffs. He made all 7 PATs against the Commanders. But before that, against the Packers and the Rams, he was 2 of 5 with his PATs. So that is something to be aware of. I think weather might have played a factor as well. This is going to be indoors, so that's just one thing to be aware of. Their punter, Braden Mann, been solid for them all year, has had 1 punt block this season. I guarantee you Dave Toub has studied the hell out of that to see if they can do anything about that and make it a second one on the season. As far as their returners go, the rookie Cooper DeJean, he handles the majority of the punt return duties, and then Kenny Gainwell, Isaiah Rodgers, the quarterback, the rookie running back Will Shipley, they kind of take turns handling the kick return duties. And I think that's how a lot of teams have done it this year. You've seen so many different kick returners, especially with Kansas City. Started off with Carson Steele. I think McCole Hardman was back there as well. And then they switched over to Nico Remigio later on. I mean, they've had a lot of players back there for Kansas City. So the Eagles have kind of been very similar in that regards there. So that is the Philadelphia Eagles in a nutshell there. What do the Chiefs need to do in this one here? Offensively, you cannot you can't have a bad series, especially with that Eagles defense or Eagles offense, excuse me. I mean, the Eagles defense, yeah, for sure. I mean, they're good in so many areas, top 10 in everything, it feels like. But you know, the Eagles offense, if they have a chance to strike first, and if they can maintain a lead, they will run all over Kansas City's defense. So it is important for Kansas City's offense to keep up and, hey, maybe even get a lead in this one year. I know Andy Reid will never elect to receive the ball for the opening kickoff. Never, ever, ever. Some teams do. Andy Reid never does. I can see the logic in this one here where the Chiefs could get off to a 7-0 start. And if they can force a 3-and-out or a turnover on Philadelphia's opening possession, boy, that could really open up the door for a 2-score lead. But that's just not what Andy Reid ever does. He always wants the ball to open up the second half. That's just the way Andy's always done things, and I can understand that. One thing to keep in mind, Kansas City against Buffalo had an 11-point lead in the AFC Championship game. And that they blew that. Buffalo had the lead at one point in the second half. You cannot afford that in this one here. If you have a 2-score lead, you absolutely need to maintain that and if you've got the ball with a 2-possession lead, you have to make that grow into a 3-score lead. You do that, they are Saquon Barkley, they're not using him much. Maybe in the passing game, but not a whole lot. It is going to be the Jalen Hurts show. I don't think that happens. I don't think it will be a 3-score game. But I think Kansas City, they made it a 2-possession game in the Buffalo game late in the first half. I mean, yeah, I know they got a touchdown on that false start there, but hey, missed calls, that happens, right? So I'm just looking at Philadelphia. A lot of people did not like that I said this about them, but I stand by it. Philadelphia is indeed a one-dimensional football team. How are they not? They're second in rushing, 31st in passing. They have the most rush attempts and the fewest pass attempts. Tell me how that's not one-dimensional. Please, I would love for someone to educate me how that's not one-dimensional when you look at a defense there. Or, excuse me, their offense. I like what Kansas City has offensively. I know it didn't look, you can look at the numbers. Oh, the Chiefs, not a top 10 offense and all of that stuff. Yeah, fine. They were missing a lot of guys this year. They have DeAndre Hopkins, who knows the playbook more than he's ever learned all year long. Hollywood Brown is back. He's got several games under his belt now, 4 to be exact. 2 in the regular season, 2 in the playoffs. So he's got a better feel for Patrick Mahomes. Juju Smith-Schuster, I know this is not a guy a lot of people talk about. He stepped up last week. 2 massive catches for Kansas City. Xavier Worthy had 100 yards receiving and rushing. Travis Kelce had a quiet game. DeAndre Hopkins had a quiet game. I mean, Kansas City has options here. They absolutely do. So this is going to be very interesting here. And I think, I'll say this again. When you look at Kareem Hunt and throw out the defensive numbers for the Eagles, I think Kareem Hunt, we all know the backstory with him. And he's opened up about it this week a little bit. This is a guy that's hungry. He missed out on 3 Super Bowls. Could have been more if he didn't get in trouble, if he didn't do what he did. Because the Chiefs have reached an AFC title game every single year with Mahomes. So maybe it could have been a difference in that AFC title game against New England. I don't know. Can't really spend too much time dwelling on that because what happened, though Damian Williams scored 3 touchdowns, so who knows. But Um, the past is the past. Kareem Hunt has a chance to make up for all of that and get himself a Super Bowl ring. Maybe his only one. Maybe. Could be his one and only chance. This guy's going to run with a lot of fire. He really will. Yeah, Chris, I see your comment. Hunt, Hopkins, Brown, these are all guys who've done well in their careers. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is a future Hall of Famer. Hollywood Brown, if he stays healthy, probably the same path for him to Canton. But you got to stay healthy. But he's got a great skill set. So this is a situation where you look at Kansas City's offense, they have the tools. They don't have a number one top tier player like Tyreek Hill. No, they don't. But I think they have a lot of good players. I think they have players who could be starting receivers on a lot of other offenses. That's how I feel about Kansas City's offense. Whether it's Hollywood, Worthy, Hopkins, Juju even. And I know some teams have given up on Juju, but the fact that the Patriots cut him and he's stepped up for Kansas City just shows you Patriots didn't use him well. I feel like Kansas City has all of the tools here. That 2022 draft class, guys like Pacheco, McDuffie, Karlaftis, Watson, Williams, those guys have never witnessed a postseason loss in their careers. Oddly enough, the one player who's not with the team anymore from the 2022 draft class, the offensive tackle, and I cannot remember his name right now. He's with the Eagles now. And I'm looking it up. Darian Kennard. Yeah, he's with the Eagles now. Everyone else, Leo Chenal, Brian Cook, Sky Moore, Najee Johnson, the other guys I forgot to mention from that draft class, 10 players from that draft class. They're all in the Super Bowl. None of them have ever lost a playoff game. Either Darian Kennard will be able to say he's never witnessed a loss before, or the other 9 players from that draft class. And I'm going to go with the other 9 players in that draft class here. I think Kansas City, they're pulling out all the stops in this one here. Do everything you've got to do. And Spags, you know he's going to blitz any opportunity he can. You know he will come up with a formula to try to limit Saquon Barkley in this one here. I think Philadelphia will get some points on the board, but I think Kansas City will maintain a 2-possession lead for a majority of this game. So I am going 34-24 Kansas City, and I'm going to go 3 touchdown passes for Patrick Mahomes. He is my MVP in this one here. My second bet for MVP would be Kareem Hunt. So those are my 2 picks for Super Bowl MVP. There you have it. That is the final game breakdown of the 2024 NFL season. It feels weird to say that because we're in 25, but they call it the 2024 season. When those Super Bowl merchandises come out, it's going to say 2024 on it, which, again, has always been weird to me, but that's just always the way it's been. That is my score prediction. 34-24 Kansas City, your Super Bowl MVP, Patrick Mahomes. Those are my picks. All right, guys. That'll do it for this episode of the Chiefs Zone Podcast. I want to give a big thank you to all of you. This is, of course, the last podcast of the season. Now, don't worry. Obviously, we'll come back Sunday. We'll have the podcast Sunday after the game. But as far as game breakdowns go, this is the final one of the season. I said this earlier, but for those who missed it at the beginning, if you weren't listening at the start of the podcast, this is by far, and the numbers are not even remotely close, the podcast numbers and the social media numbers, the video views, the interaction, the engagement, they were all at an all-time high this football season. It has never been even close to this high. So thank you guys so much. This was a fun season. I had a lot of fun with you guys, and I hope you guys had a lot of fun in the process as well. This podcast is not possible without you guys. And again, please continue to share these. like the posts, comment on them. The sharing definitely helps, especially with the videos and the reels. And if you guys haven't done so already, please make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, because that's the one that we kind of started. We started it last year, but I got lazy and didn't do anything with it. But I've been way more active on the YouTube channel now, and it's certainly grown this year. We didn't even have 100 subscribers. I think we're at 700. What are we? 784. So that's the one where I have the fewest followers, and certainly trying to make that grow this off season. So if you guys could please let a friend know. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Let a friend know about the YouTube channel if you know they love Chiefs podcast, Chiefs content, all of that good stuff there. So yeah, a couple of guys are asking. Yeah, there will be a Red Friday live chat. That's obviously not a podcast. That does not get uploaded to the podcast. That is exclusively on Facebook and YouTube. So yeah, there will be a Red Friday live chat this Friday. I don't know exactly what time. It's probably going to be, kind of later in the afternoon. So around 4 or 5 o'clock, Friday afternoon, late afternoon. So that is when the Red Friday live chat will be. Come in with your questions, your comments, whatever you guys want. That is when the Red Friday live chat will be. It's obviously going to be our last Red Friday live chat of the season. We'll still do Red Friday live chats in the off season. Obviously, we'll kind of hit a dull point, so we'll kind of play it by ear when we will have and not have a Red Friday live chat. The podcast will continue every Wednesday, and anytime there is breaking news. Obviously, the first 2 weeks of the off season, we'll have several podcasts there talking about the off season, hopefully recapping a Super Bowl win, all of that good stuff. So no, we're not going away. Still going to be here, regardless of the outcome on Sunday. So thank you guys. Sally, I see your comment. This is your first year on the podcast. Hey, appreciate it. Whether it's your first year or whether it's your 10th year listening to the podcast, all of you guys are greatly appreciated. That really means a lot. You guys are the best. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate all of your guys' engagement, interaction, your viewership for the podcast and all of the content this season. That means a lot. Thank you guys so much. That's it. Final podcast of the regular season. Reminder, Red Friday live chat, late Friday afternoon, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. pre-game live chat. Our last one of the season. We'll go live at halftime. We'll make it very quick because I want to see the halftime show, and I'm sure you guys all do as well. And then after the game, the Chiefs Zone podcast, post-game, last post-game podcast of the season. We'll have the video links for you guys to click on, call in, turn on your video, your audio, put in your name, and we'll be able to chat it up like a radio show almost. I know a lot of you guys love that, so we'll be able to do that then. I'm Farzin Vasugian. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. I'm out. Good night.